don't schedule these. Welcome to Dr. Defacto Live. Once again, we're going to get together and we're going to talk about whatever, anything concerning gang stalking or the secret societies or group harassment, whatever you want to call it. And I mentioned that before that I'm borrowing the nomenclature. People get nitpicky. Well, I figure as long as we all know what we're talking about, what's the difference? Um, but anyway, we've got a couple people out there in the chat. Targeted Pat, and welcome to the live stream. Okay. Well, it'll probably be a little while. And last night I talked about some of the commonalities that are a little odd. I've heard other people talk about these things as well. Not only the themes of gang stalking, but the 2 week thing is something that I hear a lot from people. Whether they leave their geographical area, they go somewhere else, and it's about 2 weeks before it starts up again. And that's not a coincidence. Or people will get attacked very heavily. I mean, where they're running for their life, and it's about a 2 week deal. It doesn't always follow that pattern. There's targets out there that have experienced onslaughts that have lasted a lot longer than that. I have, but I've noticed that, and it's a real high percentage of people who have these experiences. And also, when you look into some of the investigative protocol, which has changed since the Patriot Act, you have a 2 week period in there, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And so you got some real weird correlations that I don't think are just a coincidence. And then, of course, there's the themes that targeted individuals deal with. And, it's not possible for people to just have those similarities. People that have no connection with each other. Okay. And like I said, in prior videos, there wasn't a gang stalking community back when this stuff started for me. Okay. And so I wasn't indoctrinated by anyone. And I've had all the same things happen to me that everybody talks about. Okay. With the exception of some of the details, like the headlight thing, which I've seen weird stuff like that. But, when it comes to environmental tyranny, when targets are sensitized, that can be a lot of different things. But it is the same in the sense that there are themes involved in that, because I've talked about the fact that targets are attacked in mass, okay, and they're reprogrammed in a way where they think it's just for them, okay, and really it's out there for all the people who have been selected, who have been chosen to be thrown into this meat grinder, okay. And all those themes and all those coincidences, well, it's not just some type of cosmic anomaly, okay. And I guess that's what we could talk about. We could follow up on that, because there's a lot of correlations and connections between a lot of things that involve gang stalking. And I've talked about the fact that you can't hyper focus on one thing and be nitpicky about that either, because really, when you look at it, you find connections in all these things, whether it be the government stuff or the experimentation or the occult or the secret societies, or when you get into some of the things that go all the way back uh, to the Tower of Babel. And, you could move up from that into Freemasonry fairly quickly, because evidently, you look at some of the dates involved in some of that stuff. And I think, by and large, when people talk about the Freemasons, they're thinking of sometime around 1717 or whatever, with the first Grand Lodge. But really, you can go back to before the Common Era, because the connections of all this stuff go back to Egypt. And I think there was a pharaoh around the 1500 BCE, before the Common Era, who actually kind of, came out with some of that stuff. But really, all of it goes back to that era, and that would have been the Rosicrucian roots of that whole thing, which is totally connected to Freemasonry. Okay, so really, you would have had you would have had the Rosicrucians, and they started out around 1313. But really, that whole theology, that secret knowledge and hidden wisdom, that was way back, and that technically you could go all the way back to Egypt, like I said, and then of course you had the first Grand Lodge in the 1700s, and you could move up from that. And I'm trying to kind of go off of a shattered memory here, guys. And I'm gonna look at some of the comments. I want to be active with you guys, and let's see who's out there. Patton was the first one. Yeah, Ernie, how you doing? Tasha, okay. Ernie says, I feel like they're slowly killing me. I can feel it in my gut as it wrenches all the time. Oh, that sucks, Ernie. I'm sorry. And, that's one thing that targeted individuals have the pleasure of doing is speculating what's going to happen next. And I'm assuming that that's from anxiety, but you never know. I mean, targets deal with things where, they get in and put stuff in your food, or who knows, if you're brave enough to go out and take your chances at the local restaurant where you live. And hopefully they're not doing anything like that. But I've had that kind of stuff too. And then, of course, it's easy to jump to conclusions. Speaking of that kidney stone thing, I did. I totally jumped to a syllogistic conclusion on that. I had a few bites to eat, and then boom, it hit me. I thought, oh, these guys got me again, but I've had that happen. It's not by mistake that targets are wondering and anticipating these things, because that's the nature of the traumatic invasion. Now let's get out there. Okay. Uh, Ernie Ernie said it's stress. Okay, well that's good. Hopefully that'll get better. Okay. Back into what I was talking about. There's connections with all these things, and technically, you wanted to use gang stalking as the example of kind of the where we are now thing, and how do we get here, right? How are all these things connected? Because you hear a lot of targets talking about MK Ultra, or they're talking about the Freemasons, or they're talking about the witchcraft, they're talking about the occult, or whatever, or they're talking about all these things, and they're all connected. Literally, they are. If you were to draw them out, put them on a chalkboard or whatever, you could put the secret societies up in one spot. You could put the occult up in the next spot. You could put the world government, or the totalitarianistic ideologies, and so on and so forth, the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, the Illuminati. You could list all these things together. You could put gang stalking in the middle, and you could just kind of build off it. You could put MK Ultra over in another box. You could connect all these things together, even when you get in to things like the occult. Then people start talking about the UFOs and stuff like that. And then, of course, the UFOs are connected to other things. And then, of course, that's connected to the demonic stuff. And then the demonic stuff is connected to witchcraft. And then the secret societies are connected to the occult. And, of course, they're connected to the demons. And then you get into the Satan worship. And you see it's all these things are weaved together. And it goes back all the way to when the principalities and powers started ruling the planet. And it's wild when you look at all that stuff, and a lot of people don't know, about all, the hierarchies that we're dealing with now. And I've talked about that before. Um, you've got the government system. You've got all these infiltrations. People talk about the deep state, or the infiltration into the FBI or the CIA, and all these things, and all the way up to the 13 families. Okay. So you'd have the foundation of Freemasonry, then you'd have the Illuminati, the Rosicrucians, the Committee of 300, the Council of 33, and the 13 families. And just, I never usually mention this, but the 13 families, there's a bit of a controversy as to whether you have the Rothschilds literally involved in those bloodlines. Some people say they're not. Some people would say they're the Sinclair bloodlines, but you have Astor, excuse me. Then you got Bundy, Collin. You got the DuPonts. You got the Freemans, the Kennedy, the Lee, the Onassis, the Rockefeller, Russell, Van Dyke. Uh, Let me see. I think the Merovingian, and then you've got that split to where you're going to decide whether you got the St. Clairs or the Rothschilds. You're talking about a ridiculous amount of money, ridiculous. And even when you get into that, you are dealing with different bloodlines that supposedly, depending on where you're going to check this stuff out, go all the way back to the Genesis 6 account, right? So technically, you would have to go back before, the Tower of Babel and when the Deuteronomy 32:8 view or worldview came into the picture, and that's not in the Masoretic text. That would be in the Septuagint or even the ESV version of the Bible. And you have to remember that, of course, Israel didn't exist at the time that God divided up the nations, but you had a mingling, you had a type of I don't know, a copulation between the angelic realm and the human DNA. And then when you get up into after the Tower of Babel, when you get into the bloodlines of the 13 families, supposedly you're getting in to that hybrid type of lineage, and it gets weird. But all these things are connected. I'm gonna look and see what people are talking about in the comments here. Okay, let's see here. Ernie says, I've been a TI for 25 years, 12 years electronic harassment. Wow, I'm sorry to hear that, Ernie. Electronic harassment is a real, uh, it's a real hard, I don't know, situation for targeted individuals to deal with. A lot of people talk about shielding, and then other people say that they can't get away. But there's a split on that. A lot of people would say, "Well, mine's voice to skull." Okay, and the confusing part about that is a lot of these guys, there's just no way to get away from it. And I've mentioned before, really hard to tell what you're dealing with. And when I talk about demonic stuff or demonic voices, I'm not isolating that from technology because it's like I don't know, it's like the group of technologically advanced people to walk into the jungle and find the indigenous people there, and they've got their technology. And of course, what are the tribesmen or whatever the tribe people are going? Oh, it's magic. But it's not. It's just technology, and who knows? I would imagine, because technology was dispensed from the spiritual dimension, as far as when you get into the Genesis 6 account, that's one of the big things that started to happen. Even when people dig up things or they find technology, and they go into the theory of Atlantis or something like that. But I think God prevented that because it just wasn't time. But I think they tried to do stuff like that. But in other words, it doesn't mean that when people are dealing with demonic voices, they're not dealing with technology. They probably are. So that's real tough. But then you have the other side of that electronic harassment where you're dealing with maybe pressure in the ears, tinnitus, very painful side effects, the skin burning, a hard time controlling your body temperature, other things that are happening. People feel like they're getting shocked and stuff. I had something like that happen. It was really weird, actually, a couple of times. But the first time it happened to me, I didn't know what was going on, and this was way back. Well, it wasn't way back, but it was over 5 years ago, and I was still living out of that trailer, and I didn't know what was going on. I'm laying in bed, and it felt like, my legs were buzzing and everything, and it felt like the mattress was moving and something was like crawling around on my skin. It was really weird. And then when I'd move around, sometimes the mattress would literally shock me. You could see the electrostatic blast. I mean, I was like, man, there must be a lot of static charge on this thing. What the hell did I, maybe it's the kind of sheets I got. I don't know what the hell was going on. And so I'm spraying this thing down, man. I'm like hitting it with water. I'm like, I gotta kill the charge on it. And I didn't know what was going on. And then I looked in to the whole thing, and I'm not saying that it wasn't, some type of electronic harassment. There was some pretty weird things going on. But there's also the possibility that when you're dealing with stuff like that, at least from what I found, you have a type of antenna effect. So if you've got metal coils in your mattress, I guess they can build up a charge, and they can literally build up AM, or not AM, FM radio waves and stuff like that can literally charge your bed. And it's actually dangerous. I guess it can cause cancer. And so there's a lot of weird stuff going on. Who knows what they're going to do? Who knows what they're doing with technology and stuff like that? But a lot of targets will deal with weird things like that. And shielding, and whether you're whether you're covering the walls with foil. I've done it, guys. I'm going to admit it. I've done it. I've used reflective insulation. I've used tinfoil. I had a lot of weird things. You just don't know. You don't know as a target. I remember in one of the places I moved to, I would lay on one side, and every time I would face a certain direction, it would literally feel like something was cooking my stomach, and it would hurt. I would get a lot of cramps and pain, and I wonder if it's because I'm laying on a particular side of my body. You got to reason things out. You can't just assume whatever. But the weird thing was this guy's house, and I've talked about him before, all of a sudden claimed to be working, at least by other people's testimony, for Homeland Security suddenly, and was involved in some type of neighborhood watch because me and some other guy were supposedly selling methamphetamines or whatever. It was right, coming from that direction. And I overheard talking about that too, about the microwave stuff. And he was ex-military, but anyway. And so I'm like, well, I don't know, this, so I laid down, I went out in the living room, and I'm laying a different spot. Well, it's not because I'm laying on that side of my body. I don't know. And finally it got to the point where I said the hell with it. And I got a bunch of, it was a type of wallpaper, fake wallpaper, because I didn't want to just put a bunch of tinfoil up and just leave it like that. I'm like, I look crazy enough of, all the stuff that I deal with cameras and everything. And so I put up the heavy duty foil, and then I put that over it. It's kind of a nice little effect. It was better than the wall look that was there before that. And it was gone. Didn't have that problem anymore. So I could only assume, I only come to the conclusion that I was dealing with some type of directed energy attack. But I don't know. Let's take a look in the comments again here. Okay, let's see what's up here. Ernie says he's got a lot of metal in the body. Okay. On average, Joe, welcome to the live stream. I get hit with something time to time that makes my heart palpitate. I've had that one too. That's a good one. That's scary when it happens. You can literally see your chest beating with each. I've had that. In fact, I forgot about that until you just brought it up. And I was dealing with that in an apartment complex one time, along with fuming and some other things. And I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming, like I said, I'm assuming it had to do with harassment, because there were some things that I actually used some shielding in that location as well. Not only that, I had to put cameras outside the window. I caught somebody putting a tube up to the window because I had to vent the place. Apartments are horrible when you're a targeted individual. But literally like 3, 4 in the morning, they would wait till I was asleep, And of course, that's always the funnest part of trying to figure out how they know that you're sleeping, man. How do they know what I'm doing in here? I've been quiet all night. But and they were putting something up. I woke up the first time it ever happened, and it smelled like burning oil. I was having this nightmare about being in a car accident. The vehicle was on fire. And it was strong. I mean, I woke up, it woke me up. I'm like, my gosh, what the hell? Is the factory, in town on fire? What's going on? And I thought, oh, I heard something. And it was on the wall. Of course, it's like 4 in the morning. So I creeped out. I went out into the bathroom and I slammed the window open. I looked out because there was these, just windows. There wasn't even a screen in that one. I popped my head out and I could see they were pulling the little tube over into the other window and they slammed the window shut. And the suckers, you know, they knew I was ventilating the place. But anyway, getting back to the heart palpitations, I'm laying there one day and it started jumping around. I mean, it wasn't just like your heart increased, like your blood pressure went up or something like that. It was like my heart was literally jumping around in my chest, man. And it was painful, you know. I mean, this you don't know. You don't know what's going on. I went to the doctor and I said, I don't know what's going on. He's like, oh, maybe it was just maybe you got some angina or you had some palpitations or something. But I've never had that happen. I mean, it was like somebody just took something and smacked my heart around in my chest. It's like, boom, 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 boom. Just horrible. Let's see what other stuff we're talking about tonight. This is going to really make me look crazy. Okay. Well, that's always good to get that kind of stuff out before you get doxxed or something. All right. Targeted Pat, and I also think there really are people that are hearing voices that aren't from V2K. Yeah, well, I know they are. I mean, there's a lot of people talking about being demonically attacked, and they're hearing things talk to them that it's different than voice to skull. Um, and you can tell by that. I had something happen that I think was probably a type of V2K one time, and it wasn't a voice. It sounded like a bunch of different soundtracks layered upon each other, and it was really weird. It was like if you took, 4 or 5 soundtracks upon each other where there was a crowd of people talking, music, and a bunch of other things, and it was like this cacophony. And I'm like, what the hell is that? So I looked out the windows. I'm like, what the hell is that? There's no one around, and I felt woozy. I felt lightheaded, man. I felt all this weird pressure. I just felt really faint and weak. And I'm like, I don't know what the hell this is, but I just went and laid down and went to sleep. When I got back up, it was like 4 hours later, and it was gone. I don't know what the hell it was. I'm assuming it was something like that. But I think people do deal with both. It's hard to tell. I mean, I would imagine if a spiritual being started talking to you, it would be pretty much the same thing as voice to skull. It might not be accompanied by some of the side effects, but you never know. And let's see here. Okay. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. Chief Mistero. I think that's I'm not very good at my pronunciations. Tin foil under your bed is ideal. Yeah, I mean it's metallic. Yeah. I've also got a video up and it's got a link in it. I'm pretty sure the link works still about directed energy weapons that has to do with if you get in a pinch and you don't have any metal, I guess you can use a wet towel to block some of that stuff. But of course, then you get into the debate of how these things are being done, whether it's microwaves or whatever, and that's when you get into the debate where people are talking about scalar weapons and stuff like that. Because a lot of targets they try to shield themselves, and it doesn't seem like it's working, and that's when you got to wonder what's going on. Who knows? At that point, I would suspect some spiritual stuff. Another correlation that I see uh, when we were talking about the connections is, like I said, you've got the secret societies or the occult or the government or MK Ultra. And then you also have people that talk about, drug use and their first experiences with gang stalking. But of course, that's connected with all those other things. Okay. And a lot of people, uh, could be dealing with something like that too. There could be some type of, I don't know, gateway or whatever that has been opened in their life, not just by doing the substance, but by being around the people that are involved in that. Because I know that even when you get into the occult, when people talk about pharmakia, and I'm not labeling anybody as a sorcerer because they smoke medical marijuana or whatever. Because really, when you get into that, that's more legalistic. Because technically, alcohol would be a drug because it's mind altering. Well, there's a lot of things that are mind. Caffeine is going to alter your mind because you can't take medications anymore. Well, no, I'm not saying that everything is sorcery, but when you get into methamphetamines or things that have to do with psychedelics, especially, that's really when you get into some of that stuff that goes all the way back when there was a type of dispensing of knowledge, because not only was there technological things that were being shown to man, all that other stuff, and in the witchcraft and everything, or when you get into magic mushrooms or whatever kind of ways that you can get psychedelic substances, that all came from the same place. And so, if there's anybody out there trying to figure that one out, I think there's a correlation there as well. And let's see here, Nicholas Boserman. I thought I was nuts until they started expanding my vocabulary. Okay, okay, so that would be the V2K. I'm assuming. Let's see here, and see, you guys got a dialogue going. I'm not going to touch that. I'm just going to call you Chief for short. It definitely has to do with spiritual dimension and ancient technology, no doubt. Yeah, absolutely. Nicholas Boserman and Targeted Patent have kind of given a inadvertently a suggestion for people who are dealing with voices, whether you believe you're dealing with something that's demonic or whether you're dealing with something that's electronic, is to have a little bit of white noise in the background, have some background noise. And that always helps me as well. In fact, I made a video for myself last night because I got tired of using my data for white noise, right? I mean, you guys have seen the channels out there, and um, they've got the static channel or the wind or the rain or whatever, or a storm or whatever kind of sound you want to listen to, and it just loops. And I made myself one last night. It was only about 20 minutes, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper than using data. So if you guys are wondering about that, you could do KindMaster for free or another video maker and make yourself some background noise for when you sleep without using your data. Or you can get like a $10-15 um, device. I think they got them at Target or Walmart where you can turn those on, and they have different options for white noise or whatever you want to call it. Let's see here. Or like Nicholas Boserman says, he just sleeps with the TV on. I've noticed that for me, that kind of bothers me because you'll have the volume changes or a commercial will come on, and it wakes me up. So I can't do that. Let's see what else we got here. Okay. Okay. Well, we've got another dialogue. I'm just going to jump forward here. People are talking about osmosis learning. And I think we all learn through osmosis. But I'm assuming that you guys are talking about a type of, because they used that in MK Ultra where people were drugged they were sedated, and even while they were sedated, the repetitive type of, you know, I guess soundtracks were played for these people, and that's a type of programming, and I don't know if that's possible for me. I would assume that, as far as your mind is concerned, you could do that. You could probably, subconsciously do something. I mean, there's times where, obviously, like I just mentioned, when I thought when I woke up smelling that burning smell, I was having a dream. So that stimulated me to have the dream that I was in a car fire or whatever. But so I guess you could affect yourself subconsciously, but I would be careful of that. I would imagine your brain has to be in a certain mode for that to be, put into the right parts of your memory so you can recall the data and be productive with what you're learning. But if it's good material, then whatever. There's a lot of uh, prayer channels or God's word that will play at low levels that people will do that. So I guess it depends on what you use. Okay. Okay, we got a dialogue out there. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, we're moving on along here. Trying to kill the awkward silence and still look at this. Okay, Azery Saint is talking about different technology that allows people to track you, through walls and so on and so forth. I've heard that even your Wi-Fi signal, uh, you know, the way everything kind of has a type of effect that a solid object is going to be you're going to be able to track that with different types of equipment, just because of all the different Wi-Fi signals and different things like that are all around you. I guess they could do that too, but there's also other technology where they can see through even concrete. I can't remember the name of it. I put it in a video before, um, but that really gets into the creepy stuff that targeted individuals deal with, because a lot of targets will talk about that they can see them, or they're looking through their eyes, and they're hooked up to the neural network, and that's how they know. I don't know about all that. Um, but I do know that, and I explained that a little bit, or I tried in that video, multidimensional gang stalking, that you were dealing with different entities and you were dealing with different dimensions. And as a primitive creature that we are, we don't, we, there's things all around us we can't see, right? And I use the example of an AM radio not picking up Wi-Fi signals, or the fact that we can't see radio waves or whatever. And I think that some of that stuff could be demonic, but then again, you could be dealing with technology, or you could be dealing with someone who's put little cameras. They're very sophisticated now. I mean, you talk about some real high tech stuff, pinhole cameras, and how are you going to know? How are you going to know? And this stuff uh, is like that, where you just don't know exactly what you're dealing with. The only thing you know is that there are people messing with you that seem to know what's going on, whether it's when you're falling asleep, or what you're doing, or what you're talking about, or even sometimes what you're thinking about. We talked about that yesterday with Nicholas Bosserman's example, and I've had that happen to me too, where things are repeated back to you, and then you have to try to figure out, well, am I being set up? Is it an illusion? Is that something that is being put in your mind, like a lot of people will talk about with the demonic attacks and so on and so forth. And it's important to process that correctly. And I talked a little bit about that, where you're going to be led into a place where you're accused, or you're supposed to internalize these things. And when people deal with the accusations of being a deviant, or a lot of targeted individuals are accused of maybe pedophilia or dealing drugs or whatever, And then on top of that, if you throw something in that's either demonic or technology based, where things are just popping into your mind, or you feel that you are, so paranoid now that you have a combination of scrupulosity and self scrutiny, along with something that's possibly, demonic or technological, assaulting your mind, and you know that it's not coming from you, but after targets experience this type of thing, and after they experience deprivation, whether it's social deprivation or other forms of isolation and so on and so forth, it starts to wear in on people, and they just start wondering, how is all this stuff happening? I'm going to go back in to the comments real quick. Okay, let's see here. Well, let's see. Okay, I'm kind of way back in the comments. I'm trying to catch up, guys. Targeted Pat says, I've heard too many people say they get V2K to deny its existence. Yeah, well, it's a proven phenomena. It's not it's not speculative. You got voice to ear, you got the fray effect or other things, and you had the disclosure of what they did to the soldiers over in the Middle East, where they put down their weapons and thought that Allah was talking to them. Uh, like I said, really the controversy has to do with what people are dealing with, whether they're dealing with that or something that's spiritual or whatever. And that's really the question. Okay, so Nicholas Bosserman does not recommend white noise for the V2K or for voices. It's something that's going to actually probably capture your attention, music or talk. Talk shows are always good for, even if you're just anxious, something to distract you. A lot of times, it's easy to become hyper focused and start to go down the rabbit hole of anxiety and speculation when you're a targeted individual. And the other thing, and I was thinking about making a video about this, is that you are surrounded by lateral comparisons all the time. Okay. And of course, in the world that we live in, it's very competitive, a very competitive world. And just the pride of life that we are exposed to, or the vanity of this world, that's how we interact with our environment. We perceive things, we see things, we analyze things, and we come to conclusions or judgments in our mind about things. And we're taught in probably the worst way. And I think everybody that's listening to this could probably go back, even when they were a kid, and think of a time that they were compared or they were weighed in the balance, so to speak, and or you saw someone else maybe weighing someone else in the balance, and the people were being critical or whatever, and you're worried about the way you look, you're worried about what other people believe about your performance, and that's just the way we're raised. Vanity, vanity. And of course, for someone who's experienced a type of covert harassment that no one else knows about in a competitive world where you're being weighed in the balance, boy, that can really get to your ego if you let it, right? That can really bother you, and of course, you're surrounded by people that are wondering why you have not excelled in a career, or why you don't have a family, or whatever. Okay, you apply it to whatever area that you're in, or that that's that's going to be used to kind of size you up and where you fit in this world. And if you let that get to you, it's going to really bother you. And that's one of the blessings of having a targeted individual community, that people can get together and have that type of affirmation. Not that you need it, but it's nice because it is like that. You're in a wasteland, you're in a desolate place as a targeted individual, in the sense that there's really not a whole lot of people probably in your immediate area that you can relate with. And that's a good thing about the targeted individual community, even though it's got its flaws, and there have been people that have infiltrated it, is that it helps with that. I never had that. Okay. And it was really frustrating. and they will maximize on the perps will maximize on that whole scenario. Oh, what's your problem? How come you're not going to school? How come you? Well, why do you got the cameras or whatever you're dealing with? And of course, if you dare open your mouth and try to explain what you're dealing with as a targeted individual, you just set yourself up for another one. Now you're just crazy. It never ends. It's fun, and you got to realize what you're involved in, and also you have to realize where you are, and that a lot of these things, especially the vanity of the world, is an illusion. Okay, and ultimately those things are going to be done away with. Ultimately, when Christ sets up his kingdom and all this stuff is done away with, the wisdom of the world is cast down. This testing ground that we're in, because that's really what you're dealing with, is a type of testing ground that. Oh, looks like the kitty's attacking me again. What do you want, honey? Okay. Well, you want to sit next to me? Go ahead. That this is a place for people to escape the tyranny of that vanity. Okay, and in order to do that, you have to recognize it. And the fact that other people don't know what you're dealing with, well, it's unfortunate, but you have to remember that. The people out there that are just kind of bebopping along, and they're very successful or whatever. They're not dealing with the things that you're dealing with, and that could be a very frustrating situation for targeted individuals. Let me take a look and see what's out there. Oh, the kitty just wanted to come and sit down next to me. Okay, let's see here. Okay. Interesting. Targeted Pat says, my friend gets V2K along with an entire visual spectrum of activity that isn't really there. Huh. Oh, that's interesting. Visual hallucinations as well. Well, there could be something spiritual going along there too. Nicholas Boserman says he gets some holograms. Interesting. Okay. Okay. I'm way back there. For all I know, I'm not that far back. Let me go back up here. Okay, reconciled. Welcome to the live stream. If you deal with stalking from a spiritual perspective, it gives you options to counter your targeting. You have options on the spiritual level that you do not have if you look at it simply from the human angle or even the technological angle. I would agree with that because, and that goes into the area of hope too. And I've talked about that before. That if you believe that this is just a rock in outer space and you're just floating around on it, and that you evolved from, sorry about the sirens. I don't know if you guys can hear those. If you that you evolved from a pond or some H2O that got hit by a lightning strike or whatever, when you throw the billions of years of evolution at something to solve the issue, and now we have just evolved, and by the way, there's no transitory species out there, and I could mention other things like the sun, shrinking in diameter. I think it's around 5 feet per year, or the moon moving away from the Earth at about an inch and a half. But what hope do you have if you're just experiencing a type of tyranny from technology? There's no arbiter of justice, right? You came out of nothing basically. We're just kind of out here in the cosmos. Well, there is no hope at that point. I mean, you're being ruled over, and there's nothing you can do. But really, that's not true. And Reconciled brought that up in a very eloquent way, that you do have the option to pray. You can ask God for help. And even though you might still experience the tyranny, that God can give you peace in the midst of that and work it out for your benefit, and that it's going to be over. It's not going to continue. You're not just going to get tortured until you die, um, and nobody will ever know. They'll all just think you went nuts, and I wonder what happened to Bill. Boy, he just really lost his marbles, you know. Started hearing voices there. No, they're all going to know. And that's important to remember that eventually these things are going to be brought to light, even if they're not brought to light, before you leave this planet or before, Christ returns or whatever. Eventually, it's going to be laid all out. Okay. And people are going to know what you went through. They're going to know all the stuff that you've been dealing with. And they're not going to be looking at you funny anymore, or, like you're crazy or whatever, or you're an underachiever slacker. They're going to know. They're going to know. And then, at that point, there's going to be a type of, I don't know, uh, I guess you're gonna be justified, right? You're gonna be redeemed, right? In a total way. Let's take a look and see what's going on out here in the comments. Okay. Okay. Well, looks like we've got a perp here. Oh, I have to get rid of that. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. Nicholas Boserman says that look out for Charlie's channel has a program of V2K detox. Interesting. I'll have to check that out. I'll have to look and see what that is. That's interesting. Okay, looking for. There's a lot of dialogue going on out there, and I'm looking for comments that I can build off of here. Tasha Tasha Teeling says she gets everything: audible, visual, olfactory, and the whole shebang. Yeah, and that can, who knows what they can do electronically, where people are having phantosmia. A lot of things are very possible with technology. Let's see what else is going on here. Okay. Well, the chief, and I'm just I'm abbreviating your handle. I'm aware to the fact that the voice in your head that speaks badly most of the time. And so he's saying that, I think it's a he, that it's just an attempt to hack your brain. So when you're dealing with things like that, that's an attempt to hack your brain or program you. I would agree with that. I think when people are subject to voices, whether it be technology or whether it be something demonic, or even if you're dealing with directed conversations that are coming out of people's mouths, or innuendos, or street theater, all that kind of stuff, it gets in your mind. Okay, it's going into the gateways, and it's barging into your world, and you got to deal with it, whether you're hearing it literally or whether it's something that is technological based, or demonic or something. It's intruding into your world, and you got to deal with it, and you have to process that information correctly, and knowing that it's not you, as the chief so eloquently put it, is very important. And that goes into what we were talking about earlier, when people get the intrusive thoughts, or they all of a sudden have maybe sexual thoughts or negative talk in their mind or whatever. Okay. If you think that's you, that's not good, because it's not. Okay. The whole goal is to eventually, put that in there like yeast, so that it's just bouncing around in there all the time. And then, it is you. It's like that guy that came in on one of the live streams and said, "Well, you guys are crazy now." Well, no, but they are trying to drive people crazy. If it's real, it's not crazy. Okay, there's a difference between, we're using kind of a relative term as crazy, and people who are subjected to torture and become dysfunctional. There's a difference. There's a difference between mental illness and people who are subjected to trauma and torture and become dysfunctional. And unfortunately, targeted individuals are labeled as mentally ill, um, and it's not has nothing to do with it. It's not a brain disorder. You don't have a shortage of dopamine or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of snowball effects that can come out of harassment that affect your diet, that affect your mood, that affect the way you exercise, that affect the way you interact with your environment or whatever. And some of those things can get out of whack, but not because of a disorder or a disease, because you're being tortured. So there's a difference. Let's see here. Moving on along. Okay. Okay, Nicholas Boserman says the worst part of V2K is hearing your own inner thoughts as a voice in the sky. They pitch in and sound how they want. So they're mimicking your voice, is what you're saying. Yeah, yeah. And like I said, you're getting back into trying to figure out where that's coming from. The interesting aspect, I've heard people say that they can do that with technology and how you get into the deep fakes or voice changers that are very sophisticated, and they just take a little piece of your voice and they can do a whole you know video. And I've seen them where they'll take somebody who's famous, who's got a YouTube channel or whatever, or an actor or whatever, and they'll use their voice and it sounds like them singing or whatever. It's creepy how they can do that. So all they would they could literally do that with your voice. Or you could be dealing with something that's demonic, which of course they could do that too. And not only that, it's very common, even when you go back and look at the history of, soothsaying or channeling, or even when you get into the biblical example of Saul when he contacted Samuel through the witch of Endor. Um, and people are, kind of in a controversy over that. But the point is that whole thing has been around to where they pretend like they are your relatives or whatever, people that have passed on, that have left this life, and they will mimic those people. A lot of people will deal with stuff like that, and it convinces them that they are dealing with dead loved ones or whatever, but it's not. So that's kind of creepy that you have to deal with that, Nicholas. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, let's see here. Okay. Okay. Jose Gomez says he is giving up on justice. Well, that's I've had that thought too, and I wouldn't just give up on it, but I would look at this realistically in the sense that this world is pretty corrupt, and you're going to experience tyranny. Obviously, that's why we're all gathered together here on this live stream, because we're experiencing things that are not, they're not legal. It's very unjust for people to be targeted and harassed and so on and so forth. And if you expect logic or justice or whatever, you're going to be let down a lot, and it's going to be frustrating. And for now, the world is subject to that tyranny and the law of sin and death and a lot of other things. And unfortunately, we're going to be dealing with that until perfection comes. And of course, that's illustrated in the dream of Nebuchadnezzar when you have Daniel interpreting his dream. And it starts out with a head of gold or Babylon. It goes down to the feet of iron and clay. So Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Rome. And then you have the feet of iron and clay, which is actually a two-part final kingdom. And in the book of Revelations, it's the seventh and the eighth, which are kind of melded together. And but anyway, the rock comes in from outer space and it destroys the whole statue simultaneously. And the reason that makes sense is because it's all a contingency. Okay. They're all just tentacles of the same octopus, if you will. And when Christ comes back, he's going to restore everything. Everything's going to be redeemed, and there's going to be ultimate justice. Um, but until then, you're going to be dealing with that. Unfortunately, we're all dealing with that, and I'm sorry that you're depressed in that area, Jose. I think we've all experienced that. But the hope is that one day, like I said, all these things are going to be laid out on the table for everyone to see. People are going to know that you're not crazy. That you just lose your marbles, and you're not a slacker. You're not a pedophile or a drug dealer or whatever you're being accused of. And there's going to be redemption and ultimate justice for everyone. And let's see here. Okay, let's see. Okay, reconciled. Big picture spiritually, how do you deal with targeting? How did Job, I'm sorry, deal with it? How did Joseph deal with it after being sold into slavery by his brothers? David lived in the desert after Saul chased him. And I'm assuming you're going to finish that out. So, yeah, so you're giving biblical examples of the real lateral comparisons that are out there, not this critiqued manufactured labyrinth of unjust and unrealistic little lateral comparisons that you're surrounded by. You are. Okay, the reality and Reconciled laid that out pretty good. You got Joseph. He was sold into slavery. Actually, they were going to kill him first, and they decided not to. And then he spent 12 years or so in prison after being accused of rape and shackles digging into his legs. Of course, Job, everybody knows about that. He buried his family and lost everything. He was afflicted and very horrible trial. And the list goes on and on. The apostles, none of them escaped persecution. They didn't have a lot of money or anything like that. And it's very confusing looking around in the West, at least for where we are, because there's a lot of privileged people, and even the people that are considered poor, in the West here, they have quite a bit, and there's a lot of places around the world where people don't have plumbing, or they don't have this, that, and the other, and in fact that goes into the secret societies, and when you get into the globalist agenda, that when you're looking around at all these things that we're dealing with, whether it's the border being opened or a lot of the hospitals being closed, or all these things that just don't seem to make sense. It's a type of agenda to overburden the system and put people into a place where they are being knocked down a few notches, because we're very privileged over here in the West. And in order for people to accept the totalitarianism that's planned by the globalists, by the deep state, that is involved, of course, like I said earlier, all these things are connected, especially with gang stalking. That's what they want to do. In order to accomplish that, though, they've got to tear things down a little bit. But when you're out there and you're a target and you're dealing with tyranny or you're dealing with deprivation in a lot of different forms, it's easy to look out at the world and feel like you're missing out, or to get depressed or whatever. And you have to remember, like I said earlier, is that they're not dealing with what you're dealing with, but also they're blind or they're involved. Okay, so some of them, maybe they've got some of that stuff, but they've conformed, and they're not they're not going to be doing well after this is over. And the people that don't know, that are just kind of, I don't know, skipping along the yellow brick road, well, they're going to eventually find out what's happening. Hopefully, it won't be too late by the time they know. And the advantage that targeted individuals have is that you have an unadulterated, raw view of what's literally there. Okay, that goes into how, when targets try to explain this stuff, that it's a pretty hard, it's a pretty hard dilemma to be in as a target, trying to explain that these things can be real to people who are blind, to people who have not experienced it. They don't know. they don't have any idea what is surrounding them. And like I said, that's kind of a benefit. So it depends on how you look at it, but it's easy to get into that place where you're looking at things and feeling like you've been cheated or you got the raw deal, or that God isn't fair or whatever, or that, he's not blessing you. And that goes into a lot of different false doctrines too, especially when you get into the prosperity gospel. And of course, the kingdom of darkness uses that. And then you get the real Christians who really care and they are really, getting into the scriptures and looking for the truth. And what happens to them? Well, it's just one bad thing after another. Why? Well, because it's easy to use that to destroy and deceive them, and maybe even turn them against God if they don't know what's really happening. And of course, as a fundamental reality, there's really only one solution for everyone out there, including targeted individuals, and that's of course God and His provision, and so on and so forth. I'm going to go back into the comments here. Okay. Targeted Pat says, I'd call it an injury from domestic terrorism, which would make it a disability from an injury during wartime. I like that. That makes sense. Absolutely. I would totally agree with that. Definitely. Okay, I'm trying to keep up with this. Tasha Teeling said God gave Job new kids and more. Yes, he did. And that's it, but it's important to remember as well. Not that you couldn't experience blessing, while you're here. That could happen, but typically that's more of an Old Testament type of scenario. And of course, I referenced the apostles, where now your blessings and all the promises that God has for us, they're not based in whether you would adhere to the law or whether you obey the 613 laws of the Old Testament, like the Israelites or the Levitical law. Now, your promises and all the blessings are spiritual while you're here. Of course, God knows what you need, and He's not just going to, forget about those things. He's going to provide for you what you need. And some of that is hardship, believe it or not. Some of it may even involve pain. Sometimes those are gifts that we get from God. We just don't recognize that they are gifts. But after that's over, all those good things, all the blessings, all that stuff is going to be after we go through these tests and trials, and that's just the way it is. There's a difference between the blessings of the Old Testament and what we're dealing with now. Let's see here. Okay. All righty. Let's see. Yeah, Nicholas Bosman says, I hate it when people tell me just to get over it. Yeah. Yeah, just get over it. Well, you know, that's easier said than done, obviously. The other thing that I've noticed too is, of course, this is a live stream about gang stalking, and there's nothing wrong with talking about that stuff right now. But the problem comes in is when you're focused on it constantly or complaining in a constant. There's nothing wrong with venting. There's nothing wrong with feeling, or having bad feelings or emotions or whatever, or feeling angry or depressed or whatever about this. That's natural. You don't want to feel guilty about any of that. A lot of times that's a gaslighting campaign to get you to, it's like a reverse. It's like they torture you and then you feel bad about it. And then you got to feel bad about feeling bad. That's dumb. But, you can dwell on this stuff too much. I've talked about that. In fact, there's a lot of people that have brought that up in the comments, that getting their mind focused on something else, and not complaining, because what happens is it has reciprocity to it, and the negative emotions can start to build up in the targeted individual. The science behind it is the same as the sensitization and the conditioning, because once you're triggered, all those associations are connected. So, for example, it's a labyrinth that's created in the mind of the victim. We'll say someone is triggered by a certain I don't know, phrase or word or something they see. But of course, that's going to remind them of stalking, which is connected to a negative emotion, which is connected to something else. And pretty soon, all these things are tied together. And what they want to do is they want to invade your life in a way where everything is connected to something that's bad. And that can happen. It's like I was talking about earlier, how all the things are connected, whether you're dealing with MK Ultra, that's connected to, the government, which is connected to the secret societies, which is connected to the demonic realm, which is connected to, Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry and the occult and witchcraft and all these things. You can see that they're all connected, and your mind is like that too, whether it's emotions or whatever. And they want to invade it, and they want you to focus on nothing but that. Try to break out of it if you can, and try not to complain or be negative, and look at the things you have to be thankful for. It's not easy, but I've noticed that when I do that, and I give into it, or I'll be, triggered or whatever, and I got to snap out of it, because if I don't, it's just going to keep going. It's really bad. It's like when people have the V2K experience where they get attacked demonically and they start talking back and they give into that artificial conversation or that demonic conversation, and there's just no getting out of it. And it just keeps going and going and going, and it just infiltrates more and more and more. And you got to break away. You got to break away from that negativity. Okay, let's see here. Okay, let's see what we got here. Okay, well, I've kind of gone through the comments and I've rambled about some of this stuff. And let's go back in and take a look. I tried to use that, I don't know, what we talked about yesterday, as far as the themes that the targeted individuals deal with. They deal with all those common things, and then you look at some of the commonalities that even go into some of the government protocols that just, I mean, people are being investigated, and put on watch lists, and there's really no concrete reason why that's happening. And then you see some of the other things that are going on, and it just has reciprocity. It's an exponential agenda, right? And you can see the correlations that happen in the gang stalking sequelae or phenomena, where people are dealing with directed conversations, street theater, workplace harassment, electronic attack of voice to skull, covert drugging, covert poisoning, directed conversations. I mean, you see all that stuff together, and there's the connections, and it's not by mistake that there's also other correlations like drug use, or whatever. And some of that stuff goes together. And then you have the other connections where you get into the occult and witchcraft. And then you look at the secret societies that are also involved in the occult and witchcraft, which is also connected to drugs. And all that stuff goes back to the angelic, I don't know, infection into mankind and the dispensing of different hidden knowledge and secret wisdom. And you can see all these things correlate together, whether you're dealing with the gang stalking phenomena, whether you're dealing with things like hauntings or UFOs or whatever. And then you can look at all of them separately, and then eventually you're going to see that they're all connected to the occult or to other different phenomena, or you have all those connections which involve all that stuff. Even when you get up into the government, a lot of people don't like talking about secret societies or demons or anything like that. They want to talk about government. But once you do your research and look into this stuff, you have those correlations together. It's kind of like when you look at what happened with Hitler, right? It's pretty crazy. And I talked about, the Rosicrucianism technically starting out, before the Common Era at like 1500 BCE, and then you move up into Rosicrucianism in 1313 AD, and then the Freemason Lodge in 1717, and then you move up into other things. When you get into the Nazis or other types of ideologies that involve Karl Marx, because he influenced Hitler, even when you look at things that are going on in the United States now, all these things started pretty much the same way. And I talked about that in in that video that I illustrated the demonic hive, and that was demonic hive 1 and 2, where you have a connection between all these things, and it's not by mistake that you have government programs that are experimenting on people that have occult origins. They're involved in using drugs like MK Ultra, or that have other dark origins, and you look at it, it's all weaved together. So if you went back from gang stalking, you could go back to MK Ultra or different experiments, or Project Monarch or COINTELPRO. You could move into the deep state. You could look at the origins of the deep state. You could look at the totalitarianistic ideologies. You could look at what happened with Hitler. You could look at communism, and then you could move into the secret societies. Then you could move all the way back into the secret knowledge and hidden wisdom, and then you could move all the way back into the early government after God disinherited the nations, and so on and so forth. And so it all has a common origin, and it's not by mistake that there are correlations between the occult and drug use and witchcraft and the secret societies and the government projects. All these things are weaved together. Let's see what we got out there. Nicholas Boserman says that he believes hauntings are electronic weapons being could be. You could be dealing with something like that. Some people believe that's also demonic. Weaving spiders, Tasha Teeling. Yeah, yeah, it's a spider web. That's for sure. Sheep in the Mist says it's 100% spiritual. I think it all has a spiritual origin. Absolutely. Well, we are spiritual beings. Yes, yes, we are. Okay. And it's unfortunate that people have separated that from the governments of the world or the technology. All that stuff is connected. It's actually pretty exciting if you wanted to put a positive spin on it. And I've mentioned that before in videos, that a lot of people, they watch, I don't know, movies like Harry Potter or whatever, or The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings or whatever kind of movie you want to get into, and then they'll start looking into these other things that are illustrated, like witchcraft or the occult, or meditation. Then they'll find out that there's something to it. Okay, but it's more than that. And I referenced all the people that are just kind of skipping along and blind to this stuff. But really, uh, the world that we live in is like that. There are things like that. There are angels, there are demons, there are disembodied spirits. Uh, there's real stuff going on with witchcraft. And the secret societies are not just conspiracy theories. It's real. All these things are there. Um, and a lot of it is obfuscated because it looks ridiculous. Okay, a lot of people will put a spin on this whole thing that if it's evil, it's got to be satanic in a way where people are sacrificing goats or whatever out in the cemetery. Well, it's not necessarily like that, and it's almost like the elite are laughing about stuff like that. It's ha ha ho ho ho, yeah, the devil. And they're living in eloquence. They're very sophisticated. They have their dignity, at least for now. And they look at that stuff as very ridiculous. They kind of wink about it. And they talk about this whole thing as illumination. When you get into the secret societies, you have that secret knowledge and hidden wisdom, the illumination, like the Illuminati, so on and so forth. And it's not really like that. And I've mentioned before that darkness and evil appear good in its very most deceptive form. It appears like light and wisdom. Okay. It's not people out in the graveyard with crosses and skulls and stuff like that. Even though those things are mixed in, it can be there as a type of prop, or it can be there for culpability reasons because you have a lot of legal stuff involved in the geographical takeover of our world by principalities and powers giving them the right to involve themselves in the government or in different geographical areas or and even in people's lives individually. And some of that stuff is involved in some of those rituals when you get into Freemasonry or whatever, the secret societies and fraternal groups and stuff like that. But yeah, you've got a type of theme. You've got a lot of commonalities, and let's. I'm going to go back into the comments here. Okay. Reconciled says Satan is the god of this world and gives every opportunity to the secret societies to succeed in doing Satan's work. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that at all. Nope. Okay, let's see here. Okay. Oh, Nicholas Bosserman says saying none of this is man-made is primitive thinking. Well, it looks like we have a bit of a disagreement in here. Like I said, it's both. It's got to be. You know, I mean, there's no denying the fact that there are technological things going on. MK Ultra was, like that. Of course, V2K is something that is proven. And you have, you know, directed energy weapons. We already know they're doing some of this stuff. So, it is what it is. I think at the root, it's demonic. And I think that there are also people, to be fair, that are experiencing things that they believe are technological that are probably more spiritual. So I think it's not one or the other. I think it's both. Okay. Well, anybody have anything else before we end the live stream? Okay. Okay. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on and I appreciate everybody participating in the live stream. I'm going to give it a little bit longer and see if anybody comes out with something. Looking through the comments real quick. It looks like you guys have a dialogue and there's a little bit of a disagreement. That's okay. Okay. Carissa K says, I think it's so hard to understand that lots of people have a hard time with it. So they say it's spiritual or supernatural. Yeah. Well, it's a mixture. You got to look at it. Don't get caught in a straw man argument. Yeah, it's like trying to figure out whether human beings are spiritual or physical. They're both. They're both. Okay, and the hope that we have is in the resurrection. Okay, and that means that you're going to receive a glorified body. When the Bible talks about people being predestined, they are predestined to the adoption of children, which is explained in Romans 8:23, which is the redemption of the body. You're not predestined to be saved. You are predestined in Christ to the adoption of children, which is the redemption of your body. I'd like to thank all those of you who have taken part in this get together, and I look forward to the next time. Maybe I'll even do one later tonight. And I also like to thank everybody who helps support the channel. God bless you. Be good to yourselves and be safe.